Chapter 6 is a lot more fun, dealing with the purpose of education and the culture of schools, and even the different choices you can have in schools and how that's changed. And then just the different levels between preschool and elementary and middle school, high school. And so it's laid out pretty nice. And there's still some controversy in it, of course, because not everybody agrees what is the purpose. And we've talked about that a number of times so far in the course. Well, it comes a little bit more open today on what is the purpose of education, and what should be the core values of the school and stuff. So I'm going to ask you to carry a little more load. It's still got kind of long, but it's a lot easier, and stuff that you can relate to, stuff that you'll handle, stuff that you'll know. So what is the place of schools in society? Long-held traditions that come with it. First, and this you would have known without any prompting here at all, basic skills of literacy and computation. This gets a little more murky here. The society's ideals, social efficiency, and social mobility. So let's go back to the textbook. Look at this. Started out, as you know, from past study. Private schools and academies established in colonial times for children who had the means to pay. Then later on, became more, public education came into being for what's known here then highlighted as commoners. And then, early on, what was the focus of school education and schooling? Obviously, it was to read the Bible and develop high morals, become good citizens. But ultimately, to learn to read was a big thing, so you could read the Bible. And of course, it's divulged into many, many different things today. And down here they highlight, this author highlights this, primarily support democratic equality, which is a real mushy thing, social efficiency and social mobility. And so we have this over here, and what's interesting is they drop this social equality, or democratic equality, so I want you to put this in here. This will be number one here, and with a little definition right here. Socially democratic. That's number one. And then social efficiency of schools is to prepare students for their role in society. And then move an individual to up. This should be you up or down in the social class. And I'm not sure you know what that is. Social class by income is part of that. And this last statement down here, school boards, educators, parents, and communities have their own beliefs. Interesting. They have their own beliefs and perspectives about basic roles of schools. Their beliefs may draw on national reports calling for reform of education. Through such reports, as well as discussion and debates among educators, policymakers, and others, U.S. society continually refines and redefines its ideas about schools. The 5 roles described in the following deal with that. And I have been around long enough to see how this has been redefined over and over with new reforms. So here are those 5 things. Let's jump ahead here. Here are the 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's look at them. First, academic achievement. And you're well aware of this, that's a part of it. And what's interesting to me is that's number one, yet we so struggle with this. How we can have people leave our schools that aren't able to read. And I know there's learning disabilities and learning problems and stuff, but sometimes we get so much other clutter in there that we fail on this count. And we get so carried away with these other 4 that this one is the casualty, especially early on. First highlight here is to make students who take tests, sometimes teaching to tests and neglecting subjects that are not being tested, such as social studies, science, and the arts. And again, I may agree with that, but I would like to see some support here of that contention of that. And with the high stakes of testing, I don't quite understand that accusation there of why you wouldn't teach to the test if so much is riding on it. That's a taboo everybody has. Don't teach the test, teach the test. So how about this next paragraph? Media reports of students' scores on achievement tests highlights the school's ability to offer students a strong academic background. And I know that was the big idea behind standardized tests, is you could compare schools. Okay. And then down here, this one, state and national standards provide the framework for students should know and be able to do academically proficient. So there again, we have given away, it used to be local people, you, the local folks, the teachers, the board, the community sided standards, and now we have state and national standards. And this is the first mention in this text is Common Core standards. Common Core, which have been adopted by most states by the spring of 12, identify the essential required levels of knowledge and skills in English language, arts, literacy, history, social studies, science, and technical subjects, as well as math. And they talk again, that's National Government Association, Chief of School, State College Officers. Nonetheless, this is all facilitated by the federal government and the standards. And what's interesting is a bunch of the states lessened their requirements, their standards, down to the Common Core standards. And then, of course, the Common Core came with some really far out stretched things that most states wouldn't want anything to do with. But if you wanted to be part of this, you had to adopt the whole thing or none. You weren't allowed to alter it at all. National tests will assess students' attainment of these proficiencies. So that's what's interesting too. If this is not a federal curriculum, how can we have a national test that tests it? So in other words, I've whined to you before about this. We have given this away to the federal government, what the curriculum is and the tests. And schools have refined this a number of times. School systems' reputations and funding are depending, and that's the big one over here, that follow the money. And workforce readiness. This is another really vast one that's tried to be transmitted or prepared. And it was really driven of all the things, A Nation at Risk in 1983. And I'm going to make that number 2 here on workforce readiness. Nation at Risk. And this is what you do. You find a link to a page and you link it in here, A Nation at Risk, and then you also put here which president signed that into law, into national law, A Nation at Risk goals. Okay, so that's right there. That's number 2. Okay, this is interesting too. The educational system has been blamed for students not performing at the top international tests of knowledge and skills, and for students not developing the critical thinking and problem-solving skills needed for a growing number of jobs, and not enough students being prepared in science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And this isn't new. You've heard this before, I'm sure. And this next one's interesting. In addition, the workforce projections indicate that 62% of U.S. jobs will require post-secondary education in 2018. Interesting. One of the things you would think is that why couldn't we push more of that training down into the high schools? But obviously there's some maturity things that go on and stuff there in the expense of trying to put more there. So what should our youth know by the time they finish high school? 400 employers did this survey, and here are these 4 things, and I would like to make this number 3. And there's 4 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're right here. 1 is professional work ethic. You don't need the whole thing, just that set. Professional work ethic set, skill set. Number 2, oral and written communication skill set. And I want you to know what those are, because that's what we're asking you to carry as teachers. 3, team collaboration skill set, and 4, critical thinking problem solving skill set. And so if you'll bring those in, it's number 3. On to here, 3 and 4 of these employers say that K-12 schools should be held responsible for preparing students with these skills. And what does held responsible mean? Interesting. Employers complain that newly hired employees, especially high school graduates, too often do not have either the basic or applied skills to participate effectively in the workplace. Business owners want graduates with vocational skills appropriate to the job, but they also want them to have the dispositions or values and attitudes such as, listen to this, punctuality and a good work ethic. Business owners and the nation's leaders also worry that not enough engineers, computers, scientists, and others workers, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, are being produced in our high schools and colleges to meet the needs. So interesting about punctuality and good work ethic, and how in the world can we influence those in school? How can we prepare our students for punctuality and a good work ethic? And that will be your number 4. I'm going to say punctuality and work ethic. How can we prepare? Number 4, and again, clearly mark those for me. I'm very interested to see what you have. And with that, and I'm going to ask you to come back to our webpage at the bottom and respond to it also. Here it is. What are we doing, or what can we do to instill a work ethic and habit of punctuality in students in our schools? And hopefully that'll help get us started there with that discussion. And it's really kind of a challenging thing of that if they don't have that as the work ethics. So this goes on about what is our roles, what should the rules be in our society. Down here, the framework of the 21st century learning, master the basic core subject and develop global awareness, civic literacy, health literacy, financial and economic, business and entrepreneurial literacy. And so kind of a whole new world, things that you might be not aware of financial, economic literacies that are being put into curriculums. Health literacy is interesting also. Almost have information, media, technology skills to work effectively and work the workforce. And I don't think we still see enough emphasis on that, on technology skills and how important they're going to be. In this last highlighted part, workers who are competent in more than one language can make appropriate health and wellness choices and creative, innovative decisions. So also a second language. And it's interesting that if you don't think we're going to give away the care of our health also, we now have a national health care law. And even this, let me show you what this looks like here. This is the Boston Public Schools. Look at this paragraph right here in the middle. Let me read it to you. This year, the Boston Public Schools are participating in a community eligibility option. Through this federal program, federal dollars, breakfast and lunch are available to all students in all schools at no cost, regardless of family income. So Boston is the first of which will be a sweeping thing across this country, is they will have free breakfast and free lunch to all students, all funded by the federal government. So this is the control. They're going to have a federal health law, and we're going to control what you can eat, what your kids can eat, by controlling the federal by the student hot lunch programs in our schools. And the way we're going to take you to it is we're going to make it free so everybody wants in on it. So that's how we're giving away control of our health, just like of our schools. Okay? Citizenship. Citizenship is much more than voting in elections and knowing facts about the nation's history. And it comes down here, a campaign for the civic mission of schools has identified 6 proven practices for civic learning. So they are classroom instruction, discussion of current events and controversial issues. That includes the issues important and relevant in the lives of young people. Very interesting that we would encourage this in school. These authors are suggesting this, and they're saying it's come from this campaign of civic and missions of schools. I've never heard of that, but very interesting that we would encourage that relevant and controversial issues. We just discussed that last week about what you thought of that. Service learning. This provides students opportunities for community service linked to formal and curriculum instructions. And what's going to happen in our schools in the very near future is a required community service. We already do it to you at the college level to be admitted in the College of Education, and you're going to see this pushed down into the K-12 schools where students will be required to do community service to graduate. And I'm not sure how it's volunteer work if it's required. And then extracurricular activities that allow students to be involved outside the classroom and school or community. School governance to allow students to practice democracy, and simultaneous simulations of a democratic process, such as voting in elections. So that's what it is. Classroom instruction, current events, extracurricular, school governance, simulations. I want to do this number 5 here. Have you ever, when you were in school, did you vote, even though you weren't old enough to have, when there was national elections? Did you vote? Will you address that here, number 5? Did your school have kids voting days? Just an interesting tidbit. This is interesting too. Citizenship cannot be taught in a single course. Across courses and in school activities, school officials and teachers work to develop democratic citizens who respect others, believe in human dignity, are concerned about the care of others, and fight for justice, fairness, and tolerance. Interesting. Interesting. Fight for justice, fairness, and tolerance. So, all good. Students can learn the practice of the classroom how to be active, involved citizens. I believe there's a question on the test about saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Which of these? And I think that if saying a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag is a step in teaching citizenship. Then social development, provide opportunities for students to develop their social skills by interacting with others. And that's a big one. Cross-gender, cross-age, respect others. They learn to set a rules for working appropriately with peers and teens. All schools usually do not provide a course that teaches those skills. Appropriate behavior is constantly reinforced by teachers and other professionals in the classroom and on the playground. Teachers can give students opportunities to work with other students from diverse racial, gender, language, religion, ability groups. One of the byproducts of these interactions is that students learn more about similarity than their differences. Teachers can encourage interactions across groups through cooperative learning activities in which students from different groups are placed together. And that's not new. You've had that before. You know, you've done that where you were assigned groups to do different projects. Other team projects allow students to work together who might not otherwise seek out one another. And then the next one, cultural transmission. Schools around the world are expected to transmit the culture of their nation to young people so they can both maintain it and pass it on to the next generation. Schools have often approached this task by teaching history with emphasis on important events and heroes. And then we've really changed history a lot now. For example, I was just reading that many history books, the whole World War II history is being removed and revised and stuff, and I'm guessing a lot of you couldn't spew call on, if you're called on, what was World War II was all about. It's just not emphasized history itself, so it's very interesting, that tension here. This emphasis helps children learn the importance of patriotism and loyalty. Formal and hidden curricular reinforce the values of the national culture. Interesting. Principles, standards, and qualities of cultural endorses. And this has really gotten to be what private schools and more so homeschooling is built on, is really an exodus from this cultural transmission, that disagreeing with what's being transmitted in these ways. For example, we're going to transmit the values of a national culture, not always supported by families who want something else. And so as well as they're applauding it here, the transmission of cultural transmissions here, it also is one of the perils of our schools, because that's also how we pass on some of the idioms that we have, the ideologies that come along that you would disagree with. Oh, you think so? How about drugs, sex, and rock and roll? We don't even know about those things till we go to school. Then the culture tells us that's what's cool. And as it's ever changing, look how that cultural acceptance of music and dress and things like that have changed. And so it's all passed on in school, and the homeschool kids are unaware of that. And it's really easy to poo-poo. You say the word homeschool and you see people roll their eyes and stuff, but it's really based on this, is stopping that transmission of this culture that you disagree with. And they kind of plug it here. This dissonance between schools and families is most noticeable between students that are not European and not not English speaking and not Judeo-Christian. They have some common cultural disconnects here, but I think people come to this country to connect with our culture, and to run from that is always disappointing to me, that we want them to endorse their own culture. If we want to really endorse people in their home cultures, why can't we do the same for the European kids that have European descents and Judeo-Christian descent? Why can't we let them celebrate those too? But that's not really allowed. And I'm going to come over here and say this is number 6 here, and that is that homeschooling is built on countering this. Because the parents want to pass on their values and culture and not the society's. And that's where that comes from. So that's number 6. So the role of culture in schools, and I first highlight there, culture provides a blueprint of how we think, feel, and behave in society. We go on from there about these different parts of that, and that is culture is learned, shaped, and stuff. This is enculturation, which occurs when parents, grandparents, religious leaders, teachers, television shows, and our neighbors teach us the culture of acceptable norms. And that's what I'd like you to do. Enculturation here, I want this a little farther. I would like all of this on page 144 of parents, grandparents, religious leaders, teachers, television shows, I would say movies, music, all those things, and culture, and create this enculturation. Now, of course, video games and iPods and iPads and phones. If you would list all those things that you think help enculturate our, and this is number 7. And I would like you to have quite a list of things that enculturate. Say, it gives you some there. You can put those, but you tell me those other things. And maybe in your life, or people you know, what has been an enculturation process. Like, for example, my kids play sports. People on their team, the other teammates, other families of their teammates, create the enculturation. That's number 7. Not stagnant, it's dynamic, to adapting the needs of others. Okay. So what is common culture? Common culture, legal system, a democratic election, and middle-class values of American society, which serve the foundation of many of our institutions and traditions, were based on Western and Northern European traditions. As new immigrants assimilated in our society over a few generations, a common culture evolved from that. It reflected in the ways most middle-class families live. These commonalities make it fairly easy for people to identify as American when we visit our countries. Okay, so the common culture they're contending is based on Western and Northern European cultures that were the first here and set up shop. Was middle-class Protestants. For the most part, they were Protestants when they came here. Obviously, a big representation of Catholic, but for the most, the foundations of this country were built on Judeo-Christian values. Again, because they were the first here. Till recently, ancestors of early settlers dominated the country's political system, holding the highest government and corporate positions. In this role, they had great influence on the institutions' policies. Civil rights struggle of the 60s and 70s opened the political corporate worlds of growing number of women and persons of color. During that period, the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, all this was passed. And what are some of the characteristics of common culture? Well, universal education, literacy of citizens' value are great. Our job, career is important, being recognized as successful. Fun is usually a relief from work. And that is part of the culture, is fun. obviously, and everybody can understand that. It's just we all have different ideas of what that looks like. Technology is all of its forms, from cell phones to computers, and I don't use to call them cell phones anymore. They're called smartphones. Have a legal impact on have a great impact on our lives, especially young people. You, younger than me, anybody younger than me is young people. Achievement and success are highly valued and demonstrated by accumulation of material goods such as houses, cars, right? I don't have to tell you this. You know that. This is what success looks like. House, cars, boats, clothes, vacations, woo, all success. Individualism and freedom are core values. Common culture in the United States. Independence, self-reliance on the major focus of individualism. Self-reliance. That's a very interesting thing when we just passed national health care, so we can rely on the government. Focus of individual toughness and strength are admired. Freedom is a cornerstone of democracy. Okay, defined as our own destiny and success while not interference by others, especially by government. Interesting. Contending that the government shouldn't interfere. And to some people, freedom means being able to live where they want, do what they want, believe what they want, improve their material conditions if they see fit. To others, freedom is more political tone. The freedom of speech, the freedom to protest, the freedom to have one's rights respected. These two concepts often take precedence over individual responsibility for community and the common good. Freedoms and individuals. And common core, I'm going to say this is number 8, the common culture. I'm going to say things. You list things that would determine success in the common culture. Success. So that's number 8. Then what about these cultural families? I'm going to let you glean this out of here, the cultural families. And this author contends that you, as a teacher, really need to know and identify the ethnicity of the students that you're going to teach. And it talks about here, they discuss why it's important, and then they go through a long thing here of how to get to know the cultural ethnicity of your students. And so I'm going to ask you to do that here. This will be number 9. And it's going to be how to get to know. The authenticity of your students. And that's all right here on page 145. Okay. Then the cultural values. Now, the role of culture of values. Let's take a look at that. That one of the expectations is that you transmit this culture to the younger generation in schools. The authors try and frame the two sides of it here, which I believe is poorly done, but I really like you to read that, and they obviously poo-poo one. But I want you to move on to this part, the parents' choice of schools based on these values, that it could be religious schools, homeschooling, or this ethnocentric schools of curriculum and diversity. But the thing that I want to key on here a little bit is this of the hidden curriculum, and I want you to describe this. This will be our number 9 or number 10 here, the hidden curriculum. And it says here, usually support the common culture, current logical, political, economic order of society. However, some families believe that public schools do not value their religion. Some parents do not want their children exposed to the secular values of public school, or what they perceive as an inappropriate language, disrespectful behavior of students. Have you ever heard that? my kids continue to remind me how bombarded they are and how desensitized they've gotten to the very coarse and vulgar language of the school. It was a shock. My kids were brought up in a cocoon. Rather, went to a small Christian private elementary school. So when they got to middle school, their ears were burning for those first few days as they listened to these 12-year-old classmates try out their new vulgar words on a regular basis. And now they both would attest that they're completely desensitized to this vulgarity that comes, that they're so used to it that they have people around them that cannot put a coherent sentence together without some vulgar in it. So what is the hidden curriculum of the schools, and why do people object to it? That's what number 10 is here. Go back here a second. There's something on the bottom here I want to point out, and that is, again, something I think flies in the face of what we do. The emphasis on the last paragraph here, the emphasis on individualism and competition prevalent in many schools is not compatible with cooperative patterns practiced by American Indians, Latinos, African Americans. I've never heard that said about African Americans, that they have not competitive. I don't never notice that. These differences can lead to conflict between parents and schools, and that's we see some of that, not over this issue, over many things, but we've had many conflicts with schools and what they teach in their values that come from the culture. So that's a common thing. But this statement here is about some of those conflicts. And if you may not believe the schools use a democratic process which they heard the community support their things. So here's some of those topics, and I want you to talk about those. School prayer, creationism, banning of books, sex education, segregation, bullying, and discrimination are those that have all been tested in the courts. So that's what I want you to put here for number 11. Those things from page 146 right here on the very, very bottom. School prayer, creationism, banning of books, sex education, all those right here on the culture of schools. Here, let me read you this paragraph too. Because parents and other groups in a community may vehemently disagree about the value of a reinforced in school, teachers should be aware of their own cultural values. Knowing your own values as well as those of families representing your school should help prevent potential conflicts. Expectations can vary greatly from community to school or others. So let's go to this now. This will be, I believe, number 12. And that is, who is right? Should teachers be required to take diversity training? And that will be our number 12 here. And that again will be on the bottom of our wiki page. And this will be it. Diversity training. Should teachers be required to take diversity training? And again, I ask you not to respond to this until you have read both arguments stated in the textbook. And it'll be down here on the bottom of this here. All right. Well, school culture. Let's get into this a little more. And the culture of school, maybe sometimes known as the school climate, and I'm going to call this the fun part. This is the part that creates those memories that we like to think back on. I want you to read this, but some of this this deals with mascots, cheerleaders, school colors, school songs, academic, the reputation of schools, academic achievements, the prowess of your football team, basketball team, other sports teams, what kind of reputation your school has, is it safe, is it dangerous, what about the principals and the teachers, what is their culture? Talks about, what if you were next to a military base where it just had one-year students, things like that. and you know, these things are passed on from generation to generation, it seems like. And so let me take you over here. Common to the community for the most part, both unwritten rules and norms, traditions and rituals. They're passed down, experience at school and at home. And a big thing about, you know, bridging this gap between these two. Jump back here a little. Let me just say this, and disagree or agree if you want, but I went to a small school, and my kids go to huge schools, and it's just how much different those cultures are. That in any culture, there's a certain percentage of students who do not participate really in the school culture of these things. We're talking about baseball and basketball and football games, and you know, all the activities at school. But I think if I'm teaching in a large school and, you know, having my kids in a large school, a bigger percentage do not participate than in our small communities, where it's not only the hub of the school, but often the school in our smaller communities is the hub of the community, where the community comes together and embraces school culture. And I think that's where it's more likely, when and where it's more likely to be passed down from generation to generation. When you go to huge schools like my kids, the community doesn't rally around, the community doesn't pass those around, pass those down from generation to generation. So some of those rituals and stuff are lost because of that in our bigger schools. And I don't know if it's better or worse, it's just different. It's different. The culture is different. If you're in a school with 2,500 kids in your high school, or a school of 100 kids in your high school, believe me, those cultures are different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences also. So let's move on to school choices. So you notice I didn't make you write anything on this one? On this one here, I didn't have to write anything. Just want you to know. So let's move on to school choices, and let me give you a kind of an overflow here. The public versus private, or charter, hybrid, vouchers, magnet. By the time we're done with our discussion, you really need to have a working vocabulary of each of these. And why? Because of how our system is going to change, that for the most part we only knew this of public schools, and now a big change into magnets, charters, virtual schools, even voucher systems here. So let's take a run at this, what these are. You know, it goes to, again, the origin of public schools. Here's one: a land ordinance of 1785 required new territories north and west of the Ohio River to set a parcel of land for a public school for each township. And so I talked about before that each township, so you had a school district for each township. And a township, I believe, was 16 miles square. And so you can imagine, even like in South Dakota, we had a lot of little school districts that had their own little country school. And that was the land ordinance passed in 1785. By the 1830s, common schools were designed in part to reduce the tension across 6 different groups. Again, it just gives you a little history lesson here. Here's a private school. When immigrant Roman Catholic families expressed concern about Protestant Bible teaching being taught in the common schools, the riots erupted in Philadelphia and New York City, and then when it broke out of that, the Catholic Church established a lot of their own private schools that still, more than any other, linger on today. There's more Catholic private schools than any other religious denomination. And then, of course, over time, with that, the public school curriculum became very, very secular. It said more secular. More secular. No, it is completely secular. Now we've scrubbed out any thing we can with Christian or Jesus or any of those origins. It's all scrubbed, gone. You can't say the word anymore. So children and youth today have right to attend a public school. In fact, they are required, and that's really interesting here. We say it's a right or privilege, but required to be there till 16 or 18. And we know in South Dakota what the compulsory attendance laws are. Let's just check on that here, if you would. That make this number, sorry, I can't remember. This is number 13. Number 13, what is the attendance laws in South Dakota? Mark it clearly now. Show me you know it. What age you have to attend school to. Okay. Approximately 50 million students are currently enrolled in public schools, but that number is projected to increase to 52 million by 2020. So first of all, public schools. Discussion about providing parents a choice of schools that their children can attend includes magnet schools and the use of a voucher system. So let's look at the magnet schools first. In 1960, some parents were calling for school choice, in part to counteract the racially segregated schools that existed across the country. Early alternative schools were opened in Tacoma, Washington, and Boston, and Minneapolis. Many school districts continued to be pressured by citizens and ordered by courts to equalize the proportions of students from different racial groups. And really it was a failure on a lot of levels, but they were court ordered that if you had, in your district, if 20% of your student body in your district was African American, then every building had to have 20% African American, and it really it was a problem. Growing number of urban school districts developed special academic programs and custom designed for a diverse student body. Many of the magnet schools emphasized a theme such as performing arts and math and science and liberal arts, where the faculty curriculum students generally chose the magnet school because of the interest in school. And we're going to look at this a little bit farther in our projects, but that's what magnet schools are, that now they have themes. Performing arts or math or science or technology, a lot of different themes, but then for the most part they're very popular, and there's a waiting list, there's a raffle or drawing to see who gets in. Very highly skilled teachers teach there, but the emphasis is one of these. And there's some downsides to it also of doing that, and that is if you got to transport them, often families from poor kids can't transport. Okay. I better go back here and say a magnet school. Let's say this 14 is what themes. And the themes are what things are that I highlighted here.